So about a week and a half ago, I made a video about how I ended up in residential treatment for my eating disorder. And last week I talked about what my first day was like and kind of learning some of the ropes and some of the rules in treatment. And I wanted to continue that kind of theme and talking about what the rules in treatment are for eating disorders around meal times. Meal times are obviously some of the most stressful times in treatment because they happen literally 5 times a day. And there's not really much escaping it. You have to eat and you have to follow some of the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, you get redirected, which is their really friendly way of encouraging you to not do something, which is basically them just saying, cut it out, you're not allowed to do that. So if you break the rules, typically you just get redirected once or twice, but if you keep breaking a rule and you're kind of being non-compliant with the system, they will put it down on your file, and the team later on will bring it up to you in different meetings, and they may even put forth like new restrictions almost on you to kind of really get it out of you. So if they find something that you really have a hard time with, they're kind about it, but they really want you to work through it. So a lot of it is exposure therapy. So they really try and push you beyond that comfort zone. But with this, because I'm going to be talking about meal times and eating disorder therapy, I did want to make a quick disclaimer that I'm going to be talking about some of the rules because the rules are centered around behaviors and keeping us from doing them, right? So I want to just make sure if you're watching this that you are aware that I'm going to be talking about some behaviors. I'm not going to go into any detail, I'm not going to give anybody any ideas, but if that's something that you might be sensitive to, you may just want to proceed with caution. So in meal times, because everybody is so different and because eating disorders are so broad sweeping, a lot of times they really have to have a lot of rules because they need to make sure that nobody's behavior is slipping through the cracks. So sometimes there would be rules where I was like, I've never struggled with this before, it's weird that I can't do this, but for another patient, they don't want you complaining about the rule because there could be another patient that's like, I really struggle with this and now I feel weird about it. So one of the first rules that I noticed was you have to keep your hands on the table at all times. This is because a lot of times in eating disorders, it's very common for people to like steal food and hide it away. And so they wanted our hands to be on the table at all times so that we were almost in like active eating mode to make sure that we weren't sitting with our hands in our laps fidgeting or doing something else. Another thing with our hands on the table, if we were wearing long sleeves, they needed to be rolled up. And also if you have a coat or something like that, this exact coat I was told to take off many times before meals. So they just don't want you having any pockets or anything like that at the table where you can slip stuff away. With that, you also only get 1 napkin in each meal. And this napkin I think it has to stay on the table. So the napkin has to stay on the table, and at the end of every meal, you have to stand up, you have to kind of shake out your sleeves, shake out your napkin, and lift up your plate to make sure that you aren't hiding anything, which sounds so silly, but really and truly, it's a behavior that I used to do, and so I get why they had it there, and it was kind of nice to have that bumper keeping me from doing something that was harmful to myself. Another thing is, in my specific treatment center, they really focus a lot on mindfulness. So the first 5 minutes of every meal and every snack was silent. It was very awkward, but it was kind of a good thing because honestly, it kind of made you sit with your thoughts and your feelings during the meal. And also in those first 5 minutes, you're not allowed to talk, and you're also not allowed to touch your vegetables because every meal has like a certain number of vegetables, carbs, protein, dairy, that kind of stuff. And they don't want you to basically fill up your stomach with your vegetables, which is fair. I used to do that a lot, so I get it. So basically, the first 5 minutes are awkward, and I got kind of used to it. I would use the time to pray and then also make awkward eye contact with the other patients that were my friends. So that was kind of a weird time, but it was okay still too. With water at the table, every patient has a different amount of water that they're allowed to have at every meal. So for me, you start out with like 8 ounces, and I'm a very thirsty person, so I was like dying, and I begged my dietitian and she let me have 12. But with the water, you are not allowed to drink it all at once. You can't chug it in the first 5 minutes. They want you to really space out how often you need it. And it honestly was eye-opening for me because I used to be somebody that used to water load a lot with my food. I would just like take a bite and then like guzzle half a cup of water. And in actuality, like that wasn't very helpful. And so for me, it was actually really nice to kind of retrain my body that, hey, you don't need an excess amount of water. Water's not bad, but you don't need an excess amount of it at meals. And that was kind of a good thing for me to learn and to adapt to. So the next one is with cutting your food. Say you have a big piece of chicken, you cannot cut up the entire chicken all at once and then like start eating it. You have to cut it as you go. I don't necessarily know the reason for that one. I think it's because they don't want people to be like sectioning off their food in between, like before the meal even starts. So if you're cutting something, you have to do it one piece at a time and like make your bite and then eat it like you're civilized or whatever. And also your cuts and your size of cuts cannot be too small. That's an eating disorder behavior to eat smaller and smaller bites to try and kind of like, okay, I have to sit at the table for 30 minutes, so I'll just eat really slow by eating really tiny bites. They will immediately redirect you and basically say, listen, I'm gonna encourage you to not cut your food into such small bites, and then you'll kind of give them a dirty look, and then the moment's gone. So also with the food in general on your plate, if they serve you the food, so at least I'm thinking dinner time on this one. So dinner time at our treatment facility was cooked by one of the registered dietitians and one of the patients. So we had like a cycle going where like once a week I would cook dinner and then stuff like that. So with that, because dinner was kind of more like family style rather than fend for yourself and make your own food, we would scoop the portions onto our plate, and they were kind of intentional about giving us spoons and stuff that we couldn't necessarily like control the drop of. And if your food was touching and you sit down and you start separating it, they will almost immediately tell you, let your food touch, food is allowed to touch, it's okay. And you have to kind of just learn to adopt that mentality that food is allowed to touch. They're allowed food. I think they always used to be like, food is friend, they're all friends, like they can touch. So that was kind of a weird one. Another thing is you are not allowed to spin your plate, which I thought was really weird because for me, I was like, I just like to turn it so that I can get to the potatoes. And they were like, Millicent, we're gonna encourage you to not turn your plate and to rather just view it as a whole and pick from it as a whole. And I was like, okay. But I guess that made sense, and that's something that I've honestly stopped doing in my everyday life regardless. Even if it wasn't necessarily an eating disorder behavior from the start, it's still something that I kind of just stopped doing because it doesn't look very nice to sit down at a table and spin a plate. Another one was you are not allowed to tear up food. And this is one of those behaviors that I had and didn't even realize it was an eating disorder thing necessarily, but I would just manhandle any food I had. I just like tore it up, I'd like eat it. It was really weird. And the first rule that I honestly really struggled with was one, the water, and two, not being able to tear up my food. That was just something where if I had a roll on the table, all I wanted in my life was to rip it into pieces. And so it was actually really nice to kind of learn to eat things as a whole rather than needing to tear them up and needing to have that control over it, because I think at the end of the day, for me, I enjoyed being able to tear it up because it made me feel like I had power over the food in some type of way, which sounds weird now, but then it made total sense to me. You cannot be backed away from the table. So your chair needs to be like a certain closeness to the table because they don't want anybody like backing up and like just kind of like standing there with your arms crossed. You can't have your arms crossed anyways, but they don't want you doing that. Another one is if your leg is bouncing. This was a big thing for me. I would get nervous and anxious at meal times and my leg would be going crazy, and they would just tell you to stop bouncing your leg. And one of the MHWs was about it was actually really funny. She used to like, she'd like stop and look at me, and I knew she knew I was bouncing my leg, and she'd like slowly go under to look at it, and then I'd stop, and then she'd come back up, and then I'd keep going, and it was just kind of like this thing. And she was like, seriously though, I'm gonna have to write you up if you keep doing it. And I was like, cool. So another thing is, you also can't fidget, which sounds weird, but like you can't, like anything that shows them that you are very uncomfortable in that moment, they want you to kind of stop, because they want you to basically sit with that and sit with the fear of the food, sit with the uncomfortableness, discomfort. They want you to sit with all of it, basically to be able to work through it. A big part of my treatment program was exposure therapy, which is basically just like throwing you in front of the stuff that you're afraid of and kind of letting those initial feelings of fear and doubt come in, and then working through them with the professionals. If you go too long without taking a bite, or if they notice you slowing down in your intake, they will start kind of being like, okay, Millicent, just a reminder, we only have 10 minutes left of our meal, and you know what happens if you don't finish it, which brings about what happens if you don't finish your meal. If you don't finish your meal, you have something called meal plan compliance, which is basically the percentage of food that you complete eating. So typically you want like a 90% or more. And basically in the beginnings of treatment, they want 100% meal compliance. They want 100% of it because as of this moment, you are unable to tell like if you are full or if you are hungry or not. That's something called hunger cues, which is something that you actually lose when you have an eating disorder, because it's like your brain gets very confused about what is full, what is empty, what is too much, what is too little, that kind of stuff. So they want 100% meal plan compliance. Once you get towards the end of treatment, they'll start doing something where it's like, okay, you can leave 5% of your meal if you want, and we won't make you supplement. So basically, say I eat half of my meal and I don't finish the rest, they would then basically look at the plate and decide how much of, I don't know if you know what an Ensure is, it's kind of what typically old people drink. It's like that really thick milk that is just chock full of nutrients and things like that. And basically, you would either get one Ensure, 2 Ensures, 1 Ensure Plus, or like worst case scenario, you get 2 Ensure Pluses, and you have to pour them into a cup, and then you have to sit there with an MHW for 10 minutes silently, and they stare at you and you stare at the cup. And basically, if you drink it, then like you kind of get like you get your meal plan compliance score a little bit more up. But if you don't drink it, then it is counted against you and put on your file. And basically, if you are not complying to your meal plan consistently, or if your meal plan numbers are not going up, then that's some reason for them to keep you longer in the treatment facility. So it's kind of one of those things where everything in treatment is determined on, okay, well, how long do you want to be here? In my case, I thought I would be there. They told me that people were usually there from 3 to 8 weeks, and I was like, cool, I bet I can be out in 2.5 or 3 weeks. 3-week mark comes around, I'm expecting to get my discharge date, and they were like, we've extended you for at least 2 more weeks. And I was like, okay, cool. So basically, those are most of the rules. I probably missed some small ones that I probably didn't bump into as much when I was in treatment. They're kind of funny now to look back on, but honestly at the time they were really terrifying. They were very, it was terrifying to have all of your weapons taken away from you. It's like I was going into battle and I didn't have the ability to do the things that I normally did. Also, once meals started, you were not allowed to leave the table, unless it was like you were bleeding from the nose or something. And also, you were not allowed to go to the bathroom for at least 30 minutes after a meal. And if you did go to the bathroom, if you were like, listen, I gotta pee, they would take you, but they would stand outside the door, and again, they have to look at what's in the toilet before you flush. And if you do flush and did not show them what's in the toilet, you get supplemented. So you basically would have to drink an Ensure. I accidentally flushed the toilet one time. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I just like flushed it on instinct, and they were like, we're so sorry, you have to sit at the table for 10 minutes silently with an Ensure in front of you. And I was like, okay. And then I had one MHW that was really chill, and I accidentally flushed, and she was just like, I didn't see anything, and I was like, you're cool. So that is basically what meal times are like in treatment. That's all the rules though. In treatment too, a big thing is not talking about numbers or the food that we're eating or another person's plate while you're at the table. That's a really big deal, because obviously it's gonna be triggering for somebody if you bring up the fact that, oh wow, this is so many calories, like I can't believe you guys are making me eat this. They will very quickly shut you down for talking about that. But also meal times were kind of fun sometimes, because we played a lot of weird games that they would try and distract us with. We played like, I'll go through those games some other time, but we played like a lot of like table games, almost like road trip games that you would play in the car. We played a lot of those, and a lot of times you would get redirected if you brought up something inappropriate or something like that. So I got redirected a fair amount, but it was all in good fun. And that's what meal times were like. I just wanted to make this because if you are considering going into treatment, or you have someone who you love who's going into treatment, or if you are the parent or support system of someone who is in recovery from an eating disorder, maybe hearing some of these rules and learning about some of these behaviors can be helpful for you in supporting those people. That's all for today, and I'll see you guys later this week. Thank you so much.